Modern NFL players talk about player safety, like football was always meant to be gentle.
My thoughts and super prayers goes up to the skies above for that kid's family, for him, whoever had an opportunity, the authority to make that call to suspend that. The safety of players in all sports is always the most important.
They complain about hard hits, fines, and rough play, and every time they do, I can't help but laugh. Because they never had to line up across from a man who didn't just want to tackle you, he wanted to break you. Already over, this man called timeout, not to win, not to strategize, but just to hit the same opponent 3 more times. This wasn't dirty play, this wasn't cheap shots, this was football as warfare. He didn't smile, he didn't joke, he didn't care if you were a rookie or a legend. If you lined up across from him, you became the enemy. So how does a kid from the south side of Chicago, born angry, raised hard, and fueled by pure rage, become the most feared man in NFL history? This isn't just a football story. This is the story of Dick Butkus and why they'll never make another one like him again. Football today is full of rules, flags, and apologies. But there was a time when stepping onto an NFL field felt less like a game and more like a warning. Because somewhere on that field stood a man who didn't care about your reputation, your stats, or your future. He only cared about one thing: hurting you before you hurt him. His name was Dick Butkus, and before he ever became the most feared man in NFL history, before the legends, before the violence, before entire offenses changed their game plans just to survive him, he was just a kid from the south side of Chicago. But even then, something about him was different. Butkus was born in 1942, the youngest of 8 children, into a world that didn't believe in comfort or excuses. He didn't ease into life either. He arrived weighing over 13 pounds, massive, angry, and loud. His family used to joke that he came into the world ready for a fight. Looking back, it doesn't sound like a joke at all. The south side of Chicago wasn't a place that raised soft people. It was a neighborhood that demanded toughness just to exist. You learned early how to stand your ground, how to take a hit, and how to hit back harder. For young Dick, fear wasn't something you ran from. It was something you learned to live with, and eventually something you learned to use. At Fernwood Park, where kids played football on uneven fields and settled arguments with bruises, Butkus discovered something important about himself. He didn't just enjoy football, he enjoyed contact. Hitting wasn't a requirement to him, it was the reward. Every collision felt like a release. Every tackle burned something inside him that needed burning. By the time he reached Chicago Vocational High School, it was clear he wasn't just bigger or stronger than everyone else. He was angrier. And unlike most players, he didn't hide it. He played fullback, linebacker, punter, and kicker. Wherever violence was needed, he volunteered. As a linebacker, he made nearly 70% of his team's tackles. 70%! Opposing teams didn't avoid him because coaches told them to. They avoided him because their bodies learned faster than their brains. In his first varsity season, his team allowed just 55 points in 8 games. That wasn't a defense. That was a lockdown. The city noticed, reporters noticed, scouts noticed, and for the first time ever, the Chicago Sun-Times named a junior, not a senior, the city's player of the year. College recruiters started showing up at his house like clockwork. One scout said something that followed Butkus his entire life. You can teach technique, but you can't teach that kind of intensity. They were right, because intensity wasn't something Dick Butkus learned. It was something he was born with. And the scariest part? He was only getting started. By the time Dick Butkus arrived at the University of Illinois, the anger that once made people nervous now made them afraid. College football was supposed to humble players. Bigger fields, faster athletes, smarter coaches. For Butkus, it did the opposite. It gave his rage a larger stage. Illinois didn't just get a linebacker. They got a problem for every offense they faced. Most players try to control their emotions by calming down. Butkus learned something far more dangerous: how to sharpen his anger instead of wasting it. Fear still existed, but he refused to let it weaken him. In his own words, fear had to be acknowledged first and then converted into anger. That transformation became his secret weapon. Before every snap, while other players adjusted gloves or called out signals, Butkus prepared differently. He growled, he grunted, he stared, not for show, but to flip a switch inside himself. Teammates said once that switch flipped, he stopped playing football and started hunting. And he played both ways, offense and defense, just like high school, just like he wanted it. While defenders dreaded facing him, offensive linemen hated blocking him. He didn't give them clean hits, he gave them collisions. Every snap felt personal, even when it wasn't. And when it wasn't, he made it personal anyway. If the opposing team laughed during warm-ups, Butkus convinced himself they were laughing at him. If a player smiled after a play, he took it as disrespect. He didn't wait for reasons to be angry, he created them. Because anger kept him sharp. Anger kept him fearless. That mindset carried Illinois to the 1963 Rose Bowl. On college football's biggest stage, Butkus didn't blink. He dominated. He led the team. And when the game ended, Illinois walked away with a Rose Bowl victory, and Butkus walked away as one of the most respected players in the country. By then, awards followed him everywhere. Two-time consensus All-American, Big Ten MVP, college football's Lineman of the Year. But numbers didn't explain what made him different. Fear did. Opponents didn't talk about his stats, they talked about his presence, how the field felt smaller when he was on it, how plays broke down the moment he charged forward. Coaches warned players about him. Quarterbacks rushed throws, running backs hesitated, and hesitation was deadly. Scouts knew what they were seeing. One of them said it plainly. You can teach technique, but you can't teach violence with discipline. Both the NFL and the AFL wanted him, badly. Offers came in, money was waved around, bigger markets, easier paths, but Butkus didn't care, because no matter how far his reputation spread, no matter how loud his name became, there was only one place he wanted to unleash everything he'd built inside himself: home. And when Chicago called, he didn't hesitate. When Dick Butkus left college football, the question wasn't if he'd dominate the NFL. The question was whether the NFL was ready for him. Both leagues wanted him, the NFL, the AFL. Bigger contracts, bigger markets, easier paths. Denver offered more money. New cities promised fresh starts. For most players, the decision would have been simple. Butkus didn't hesitate. He chose Chicago. The same streets that hardened him, the same city that taught him how to fight, the same place that expected toughness, not excuses. In 1965, the Chicago Bears selected Dick Butkus third overall in the NFL draft. Moments later, they drafted Gil Sayers, two generational talents, two future Hall of Famers, one draft, one city. It should have been the beginning of a dynasty. Instead, it became one of football's greatest what-ifs. From his very first training camp, veterans noticed something was wrong, and not with Butkus. Rookies were supposed to listen, learn, adjust. Butkus didn't adjust. He collided. He didn't respect reputations. He didn't care about Pro Bowls or championships. If you lined up across from him, you were treated the same. Practice hits felt like game hits. Game hits felt like punishment. Teammates said it was simple. Hold the runner for a second, then get out of the way. Because if you didn't, Dick Butkus might hit you too. The league noticed immediately. In his rookie season, Butkus intercepted 5 passes and recovered 6 fumbles, unheard of for a linebacker. Quarterbacks rushed throws, running backs changed lanes mid-play, tight ends stopped volunteering to block him. Even opposing coaches adjusted. But the most shocking reaction came from Vince Lombardi. Lombardi didn't praise rookies, especially not rookies on rival teams. Yet after watching film of Butkus, Lombardi openly complimented him. That single comment stunned his own locker room. Packers veterans stayed late, watching extra tape, trying to understand what their coach had seen. What they saw was fear. Not trash talk, not showmanship. Fear. Butkus didn't celebrate big plays. He didn't pump fists. He simply stood up and walked back to the huddle, as if violence was just another job requirement. And that calm made him even scarier. Still, something didn't make sense. With Butkus terrorizing offenses and Gil Sayers electrifying crowds, the Bears kept losing. Close games slipped away. Leads vanished. And once again, Dick Butkus found himself carrying more than his share of the weight. Because while Chicago had 2 legends, they didn't have a team. bad quarterbacks, weak offenses, cheap ownership, and a defense that never got a break. Week after week, Butkus went back onto the field, not rested, not protected, but angry. And anger kept him dangerous, but it also set the stage for what came next, because when frustration, fear, and violence finally collided, Dick Butkus didn't just become great, he became unforgettable. The moment Dick Butkus stepped onto an NFL field, something changed. Not on the scoreboard, not in the stats, but in the way the air felt. Veterans who had played for years suddenly realized college dominance didn't explain this, because this rookie wasn't trying to make a name for himself. He was trying to make a statement. From his very first season with the Chicago Bears, Butkus played like every snap was personal. He didn't test the league, he attacked it. 5 interceptions, 6 fumble recoveries. Quarterbacks stopped looking comfortable. Running backs stopped cutting inside. Offensive coordinators quietly erased plays from their playbooks, plays that went anywhere near number 51. Even Vince Lombardi noticed, and Lombardi didn't praise rookies, especially not rookies on rival teams. But after watching Butkus on film, Lombardi did something that stunned his own locker room. He complimented him. Packers veterans were so confused, they stayed late just to study the film themselves. What they saw scared them. Blocking Dick Butkus wasn't about technique. It was about overcoming what Packers center Bill Curry called the feeling. Before contact ever happened, there was a presence, an invisible weight, almost like a smell in the air. You felt it before you felt the hit. And when you felt the hit, you remembered it. One player didn't learn fast enough. In 1969, Lions rookie running back Alty Taylor called Butkus overrated after a game. Just words, just trash talk. But Butkus didn't forget. When the teams met again at Wrigley Field, Taylor tried running out of bounds to escape him. He didn't escape. Butkus chased him straight into the stands. Fans scattered. Taylor leapt over the sideline like a man fleeing a burning building. It wasn't a tackle. It was a message. Around the league, players adjusted. Some refused to run inside at all. Others admitted they hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. And that was enough. Even O.J. Simpson later admitted something shocking. Dick Butkus was the only player who truly scared him. But here's the cruel twist. While Butkus was becoming the most feared man in football, the Chicago Bears were falling apart around him. Season after season, losses piled up. Bad quarterbacks, weak offenses, cheap ownership. Teams scored on Chicago, then punted right back to a defense that never got a break. And Butkus paid the price. Every snap meant more punishment, more collisions, more bodies crashing into his. But he never slowed down. He never backed off. In 1969, the Bears went an embarrassing 1-13. 1 win, 13 losses. And Dick Butkus was named NFL Defensive Player of the Year, voted on by the players themselves. Think about that. The best defender in football on one of the worst teams ever. That same year, Sports Illustrated put him on the cover and called him the most feared man in the game. Coaches were asked one simple question. If you could start a team from scratch, who would you pick first? They picked Butkus. But fear comes with a cost. Because while offenses were terrified of him, something else was quietly breaking down. Something far more dangerous than any opponent. His body. Fear made Dick Butkus a legend. But fear was also destroying him. By the early 1970s, the violence that once fueled Butkus was slowly turning against him. Every collision added up. Every tackle stole something from his body. His knees, especially the right one, began to betray him. Swelling, sharp pain, limited movement. Pain that didn't fade on Monday or Tuesday or ever. Most players would have stepped back. Most players would have adjusted their game, avoided contact, protected their future. Dick Butkus did the opposite. If anything, he played harder, because slowing down meant admitting weakness, and weakness wasn't something he understood. He believed pain was temporary, fear was permanent, and fear was something he refused to feel. So he kept charging, snap after snap, season after season, even when walking hurt more than getting hit. The Bears noticed. They just didn't care. The medical staff treated him the same way they treated the team's losing seasons, with shortcuts, painkillers, injections, temporary fixes. There were no second opinions back then, no outside doctors. If the team doctor said you were fine, you played. And Butkus always played. According to him, the report said he was cleared, even when he could barely bend his knee. Coaches saw the paperwork. Ownership saw the results. As long as number 51 was still terrorizing offenses on Sunday, no one asked what his body looked like on Tuesday. Why would they? The Bears were losing, the fans were angry, and Dick Butkus was the only thing keeping the team relevant. So they pushed him, over and over, past pain, past reason, past responsibility. Loyalty became expectation. Expectation became exploitation. By the time his career ended in 1973, Dick Butkus wasn't walking away from football. Football was tearing itself out of him. The rage that once protected him was gone. All that remained was damage, damage that wouldn't heal. And slowly, the realization hit him harder than any linebacker ever could. The team he sacrificed everything for knew exactly how bad it was, and they played him anyway. That realization broke something inside him. After his career ended, Dick Butkus did something unthinkable for his era. He sued the Chicago Bears, not for fame, not for revenge, but for accountability. The lawsuit claimed the team's medical staff caused permanent damage by forcing him to play through injuries that should have ended his seasons. The amount? $1.6 million. They settled out of court for $600,000, but the money didn't matter. What mattered was the silence that followed. Butkus and Bears owner George Halas didn't speak for 5 years. The loyalty Butkus showed Chicago was never returned in the same way. The city he bled for had already moved on. And for the first time in his life, the most feared man in football had to face something he'd never prepared for: life after violence. When Dick Butkus walked away from football, the noise stopped. No crowds, no collisions, no fear. For the first time in his life, the most feared man on the field was alone with his thoughts and with a body that refused to forget what football had taken from him. The pain didn't fade with time. It followed him. Every step, every morning, every reminder that greatness always demands payment. And sometimes the bill comes due all at once. Butkus had due in the game everything: his anger, his health, his future. And yet, when it ended, there was no farewell tour, no championship run, no storybook ending. Just silence. And that silence forced the question no one wanted to ask. Was it worth it? Statistically, there was no debate. Dick Butkus finished his career with over 1,000 tackles, 22 interceptions, and 27 fumble recoveries, an NFL record at the time. He was selected to 8 Pro Bowls, named first-team All-Pro 5 times, won Defensive Player of the Year twice, including once on a team that won only a single game. One win. Think about that. The league said he was the best defender in football, while his team collapsed around him. That alone tells you everything you need to know about who Dick Butkus was. In 1979, just 6 years after his career ended, Butkus was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. No hesitation, no waiting period. History didn't need time to decide. It already knew. He stood there, immortalized not for championships, not for rings, but for fear, for intensity, for a standard of violence so extreme it changed how the game was played. Offensive coordinators redesigned schemes. Players adjusted careers. The middle of the field became a place you survived, not attacked. And yet, the irony remains. The Chicago Bears never gave him the team he deserved. They drafted Dick Butkus and Gale Sayers in the same year, 2 generational talents, 2 Hall of Famers, and somehow turned it into a lesson in organizational failure. Cheap ownership, poor planning, broken systems, even greatness couldn't overcome it. In 1994, nearly 30 years after they first wore the uniform, the Bears finally did what they should have done long before. They retired both numbers, 51 for Butkus, 40 for Sayers, in the same ceremony. Side by side. 2 legends, 1 city, 1 wasted era. By then, football had changed. Rules tightened, hits softened, safety became a priority. And every time someone complains about how hard the game is today, Dick Butkus' name comes up, not as a suggestion, but as a warning, because they don't make players like him anymore. And maybe that's a good thing, because Dick Butkus wasn't built for football. Football was built to survive him. So when you watch today's game, the flags, the fines, the rules, remember there was once a man who played without protection, without mercy, and without regret. A man who turned fear into fuel and pain into legacy. The most feared man in NFL history. Not because he talked, not because he celebrated, but because once the ball was snapped, you couldn't escape him. So now the question belongs to you. Was Dick Butkus the greatest linebacker to ever play the game? Or was he something even rarer, a reminder of what football once was? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because legends like this aren't just remembered, they're argued about forever.